Good evening from the House of Representatives, Parliament House in Canberra. Here in this place just 2 nights ago, the Federal Treasurer, Mr Paul Keating, delivered his budget, a statement of proposed revenue and expenditure for the country for this coming year. Tonight, it's the turn of Mr Andrew Peacock. As Leader of the Opposition, he takes his place at the dispatch box to present to us on live television just where the Opposition sees the Hawke Labor government is going wrong economically. It's now been confirmed that this was a pre-election budget. So tonight, for Mr Andrew Peacock, it's a pre-election opportunity to express just what the Opposition would do should it come to power following an election, whenever that may be. Tonight, too, is the opportunity for the government front bench to see just what sort of challenge is presented by not only the policies, but by Mr Andrew Peacock himself. We're just awaiting the arrival of the Speaker of the House, Dr Harry Jenkins, with the Assistant Sergeant-at-Arms. They should be joining us, indeed they are now, so that very shortly we'll have the continuation of the debate on the Appropriation Bill number 1, 1984-85. The Speaker.
Order. Clerk. Order of the day number 7, Appropriation Bill number 1, 1984-85, second reading, resumption of debate on the budget.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, the greatest challenge before Australia today is to sustain and expand the fragile recovery and ensure that all Australians share in it. This government has been quick to falsely claim credit for an economic upswing, largely based on one-off factors, the US-led world recovery, the lifting of the drought, and the previous coalition government's wages pause. But it has not shown either the leadership or the political courage that's necessary to seize the rare opportunity before us to build on these factors to achieve a new decade of prosperity for Australia. The goals of my future government are very clear indeed. We want to see every Australian in a job. We want to see more businesses, small and large, profitable and expanding, because growth means jobs. We want to see ordinary people, average Australians, rewarded for their hard work. And we want to see Australians keeping far more of their hard-earned pay and not having it confiscated by taxes. We want to bring the disadvantaged in our community back into the centre of government consideration through humane and through caring policies. Budgets are not just about statistics and reams of paper. Above all, they're about people and their futures. The economic decisions before us have to be taken with long-term security and the well-being of all Australians in mind. If the economic recovery is to be strengthened, if the economic recovery is to be sustained, and if the benefits of recovery are to flow to the unemployed, the government has to create an environment in which people are prepared to spend and in which business has the capacity and the incentive to both invest and to grow. Now that means, of course, that the government has to reduce the burden of taxes to increase incentives, that it has to restrain its spending and indeed its borrowing to leave business with the resources to grow. But for the second successive year, this government has shown it doesn't really believe in these basic facts of economic life. What is it? It's a big spending, high taxing government which has added more to the national debt and the national interest bill. And let's just look at the facts. After adjusting for inflation, Labor has added more to government spending in 2 budgets than the previous coalition government added in a whole 7 years. The Hawke government is the biggest spending peacetime government in Australia's history. It even exceeds the wildest days of Whitlam. And to finance its unprecedented spending binge, this government has inevitably become the highest taxing government in Australia's history. Now, in spite of this, the Hawke Labor government has also had to further increase the national debt to finance their projects. Today's income taxpayers are paying over $17 a week just to fund the interest on that debt. And future taxpayers will face an even higher burden as a result of the decisions of this government. Decisions that have added about as much to the nation's debt in the last 2 years as were added in the previous 6. The big debt and the high spending policies of this government are unquestionably destroying the flexibility that's needed to build a sustained recovery. And by establishing a higher spending and higher debt base on which future budgets have to be built, it's given the ever-rising hawk tax spiral another boost. Now, the plain and the obvious fact is that this government's budget strategy has the economic fundamentals all wrong. Far from being the responsible budget, that's been claimed by the government, this budget is storing up problems for the future and threatening the basis of sustained recovery. Now, as our economic policy is clearly stated, the next coalition government will put economic policy and the budget back onto the tracks. We'll rein in and we'll restrain government spending to ensure the private sector has the room to grow. Now, the reality, Mr. Speaker, is this. We can achieve a new decade of prosperity for all if government, in partnership with all Australians, makes decisions which are far-sighted, which are balanced and which are fair. Far-sighted, balanced and fair. Now, Labor's second budget is a profound disappointment to the great majority of Australians because it does nothing to advance Australia towards real and lasting national development or anything toward lasting employment. The budget and the government's economic policies lock the nation on a course which is the reverse of the one that we ought to be travelling. This budget means higher tax, fewer jobs and more government. And it's therefore short-sighted, unbalanced and manifestly unfair and discriminatory in its treatment of large groups in the community. Now, let's look at this budget and Labor's claims to be fair. First, the fact is that the Australian on the average wage, not a wealthy Australian, will still pay 46 cents income tax on every extra dollar earned. Second, the living standard of the average wage earner will do nothing more than stagnate during 1984-1985, despite working longer hours and the so-called tax cut. Third, the number of Australians unemployed will be virtually unchanged. And all this in a year when there's supposed to be rapid economic growth and a 23% increase in total income tax paid to the government. It's hardly fair, it's hardly balanced, and it's certainly not the type of Australia that we want or the type of Australia that we need. And now, just under 18 months after coming to office, Labor's scuttling off to another election. Now, if the Hawke government had confidence in its policies, if it had confidence in this budget, why race off to an early election? What have you got up your sleeves? They may well produce a few bunnies. Because the facts about this budget are, firstly, many of its measures are temporary in nature, designed to paper over the cracks until the election is held. Secondly, it's a budget born of backroom dealing, consultations with trade union officials, the ACT, locked in the cabinet room, anyone else denied, but 3 times brought in to determine the nature of the budget. Is it any wonder that the Secretary of the Treasury, Mr Stone, resigned in disgust 5 days before the budget? I'd only assume he didn't know who to report to, the Treasurer or Mr Dole. And thirdly, while the ACTU has had unprecedented control of the budget process, the needs and the aspirations of other groups in the community have been absolutely ignored. And let's just look at some of them. Because Labor has shut the door on taxpayers, on families, on pensioners, on small business, on the unemployed, on farmers and their families. Taxpayers, through the illusory tax reductions and a declining standard of living. Families who obtain no relief and find no incentive. Pensioners who've been hit by Labor's attacks on their retirement security. Small business people who find that Labor has again failed to honour its specific commitments to help them. The unemployed through the continuation of anti-jobs policies, and farmers and their families through the continued failure of the government to provide for the special needs of primary producers and, of course, rural centres. And furthermore, all those people in this country, and it excludes this government, who care about the defence of this nation, who care about the security of our country, know that Labor has cut vital areas of defence expenditure and threatens strategic alliances. The Republican Party produces its platform yesterday, naming its friends in the area. Who does it exclude? Australia. And you know why. But the harshness of this budget, when you weigh it up, when you add it up, the people who are hit by Labor's second and, let's say it, Labor's last budget, those who are hit are ordinary, decent Australians from all walks of life and all parts of the country. The ordinary Australian is not in the vocabulary of the Prime Minister. When did you last hear him talk about the family? When did you last hear him talk about an ordinary Australian? When did you last hear him talk about the worker wanting to improve his life? Not even in his vocabulary. Now, every Australian agrees that we in this country live in an overtaxed and overgoverned nation. But what has this government done to honour the Prime Minister's 1983 promises? And remember what it was in regard to tax? Immediate tax cuts for 99% of the community. Less than 18 months later, the Treasurer comes into this House and tries to fool people. Now, the fact is, the average wage earner's tax position is already $22 a week worse under Labor, and now, 48 hours ago, the Treasurer comes in and offers some Australians $7.60, and most of them a lot less than that. Ordinary Australians, average Australians, on average wages, they've lost $22 a week because of this government. It's hardly a tax cut. Indeed, it's not a tax cut to take away $22 a week and then months later give back less than $8. People are not fooled by this. And what about the deceitful methods used by the government? Because the thimble and pea tax trick comes in a shuffling of the tax rates. Because the hard fact is, even after these phony tax cuts, the average wage earner stays in the 46 cents in the dollar tax bracket. The average wage earner, 46 cents in the tax bracket, paying nearly half of every extra dollar earned to Canberra. What it comes down to is this: of every overtime hour worked, half an hour goes to you in tax. In the next year, hundreds of thousands more will move into the 46 cents bracket, and over 1 million taxpayers will move into higher tax brackets. And while Labor won't index your tax scales, they've got no hesitation in indexing taxes on petrol or on beer or on tobacco so that they go up automatically every 6 months, plus adding another 10% on wine. And what's to be remembered is that they go up and up again, automatically. Now, what's the value of a phony tax cut in this? And everyone knows what's in Labor's tax pipeline. Should this government be returned at the next election, the people of Australia ought to know before that polling day that Labor is poised, ready to impose a new capital gains tax, a gift duty and federal death duties. And that's what every faction of the
Order! The level of
publicly
interjection
committed
is getting to too high a level. I think the Leader of the
So
Opposition
we'll get
should
further
extend
attacks
courtesy.
on those who work and save to get ahead because this is the politics of envy. This is the politics of levelling down, the politics of a socialist government. Just let me make it clear. We won't have a bar of a capital gains tax, or a gift duty, or of federal death duties. We stand for fundamental tax reform, not this tinkering on the periphery of the tax programs and election tricks that are played out now in the months before a budget. Because the sad reality is that through Labor's tax take, there's been a significant decline in living standards in the community, and there's worse to come. Well, we'll reverse that trend by getting the taxman off people's backs. And when we go to this early election, we'll offer Australians a clear choice on taxation policy. Our program will achieve genuine personal tax cuts and a net reduction in tax overall. You want it in a nutshell? Labor will tax you, but we'll encourage you. Because, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing in this budget for families. Nothing in this budget for families. There are no increases in family allowances, no increase in the spouse rebate, and little on childcare. Yet the family ought to be the key to Australia's future. It's the basis of our approach to government and indeed to our economic management. And our family policies will give families incentives through the maintenance of family allowance, a positive commitment to childcare and assistance in achieving that great goal of home ownership. And we will ensure that families can exercise a choice in education for the young.
Order. The honourable member
that parents have the dignity of a job and that the elderly have security in retirement. The fact is also that this budget marks another step in Labor's calculated attack on the elderly. For 18 months they've been mistreated as second-class citizens by this government. Pensioners were promised substantial pension increase, and they've been given a miserly 45 cents a week above the government's Medicare fiddle. And the means test on the over 70s, the 31% tax on lump sum superannuation and the assets test are all broken promises imposed after the last election. And Labor's assets test means putting the aged through the ringer of interference, of confusion and anxiety. And it means intrusion into their homes, valuing personal possessions and filling out forms. And I just say this, never in the history of this country has any government allowed bureaucrats the right of entry into every pensioner's home simply to check on the valuation of their personal possessions. And I want to make it clear to those millions of Australians who are retired or nearing retirement, you have a choice and you can do something about those inequities. One of our first acts after the next election will be to scrap this unfair assets test and the 31% slug on lump sum superannuation that'll go with it. Because our retirement, our security and our social welfare policies will give a fair go to the elderly and real assistance to those in genuine need. And what about small business? We'll also make it possible for the dreams of small businessmen and women to come true. So often, it's small business which can't cope with Labor's deals with big interests. They can't afford to absorb the flow-ons of full wage indexation and carry the mounting on-cost burden. And there's nothing in this budget for small business. And yet small business employs over 60% of the Australian workforce. Now, there are 700,000 small businesses in our country, 700,000, and they're a vast source of employment and of innovation and of healthy competition. and small business is the key to jobs for the 630,000 registered unemployed. We don't take a defeatist attitude to this nation. We believe that we can conquer unemployment, and we can do it through a positive partnership between government and small business. And yet this government continues and continues to ignore the potential of small business and smother them with tax and with red tape. You came to office promising small business a program of incentives, and yet after 2 budgets, those who operate in small businesses are still waiting for action. Because the truth is that small business just doesn't fit into Labor's corporate state. They've been consigned to the too hard basket, and with them hundreds of thousands of jobs. Our small business policy firmly commits us to initiatives which allow small business to lead the nation into a decade of prosperity and back to full employment. We'll increase investment incentives to business and industry, not scrap them, as this government has done with the investment allowance. The Coalition recognises that through incentives, business will invest and business will expand. And it will create in that process more jobs. You don't create jobs in the public sector. Long-term jobs can only be created in the private sector, but you refuse to recognise that maxim. And we'll introduce a fleximum and flexible new industrial relations system which benefits both employees and employers. Now, what about the rural sector? The harsh reality is you've done nothing for farm families and those in rural centres. They just come out.
The level of interjection is too high.
Worst drought, if not the worst drought in Australia's history. But the fact is our greatest export earners are still our Australian primary producers. And yet you turn a blind eye to the special needs of those in primary industry. Right around the world, every government recognises that special measures are needed for primary industry. But you've presided over a dismantling of the income equalisation deposit scheme, so important to farmers who have to contend with drought and with worldwide fluctuations. And you've cut incentives and you've dramatically increased charges to primary producers. Let me just show how much concern your party has for the farming community. Mr. Speaker, at the National Conference, the Labor Party spent 60 minutes discussing whether a Canberra delegate should be someone from the left wing or the right wing, and then proceeded to spend 6 minutes on primary industry. About a similar proportion of this budget is devoted to rural measures. And our comprehensive rural policy provides country people with a fair deal. We'll restore the income equalisation deposit scheme, just as an example, and we'll improve drought relief assistance, and we'll free up the primary industry bank so that it can better meet the needs of those on the land, and we'll provide major assistance for the fishing industry and provide the encouragement and understanding that the rural sector so badly needs. Now, Mr. Speaker, the bottom line on this budget and the bottom line on this government is that together they imperil our chances of long-term recovery. They're mortgaging the future of this and present generations of Australians. The annual interest on the debt in this budget is larger than the total amount that we spend on education. It takes an extra $17 a week from each taxpayer just to pay that interest. That's the interest on the public debt they're creating. And this huge debt means one thing: more taxes and more charges are on the way. Now, how can business and how can industry maintain their competitiveness, so vital for investment and jobs, when the government refuses to show the restraint that's required? Mr. Speaker, we have a decade of prosperity within reach, yet each day this government delays in making the right decisions Each day we move further away from that goal. But there is a better way. And there is a choice that'll be before the people in some weeks or months' time, whenever the Prime Minister decides to end the uncertainty and the flirtation that he's having, mulling over the election date without telling anyone else. There is a better way, and the Coalition has set out the programs that are needed now, and we will continue to spell them out further throughout the lead-up to this unnecessary early election. When it comes down to Tours, the choice will be between a socialist government spending more and adding to the debt of this nation and breaking promise after promise. On this side of the House, we're dedicated to achieving growth and development through the private sector and freeing up that private sector and through private economic management of the public sector, not the skyrocketing growth in government that we're seeing under Labor. And we're pledged to bringing all Australians, particularly the poor and particularly the unemployed, who are swept to one side by this budget, back into the mainstream of government consideration. And the challenges before us, we can and will move ahead by exercising the courage and the determination which looks beyond any early election, which looks beyond political self-interest, to a better Australia for all of us. And that choice will be ahead for all Australians, and they'll make the determination. They'll see through the phony tax cuts of this budget. They'll see the diminution of their own living standards as they felt them for days and weeks and months under this government, increasingly impacting upon them, and they'll recognise that the determination that comes from those that look beyond the early election date and political self-interest is better for Australia and better for us all.
And that's where we'll leave this telecast of the Leader of the Opposition's reply to the federal budget. This debate will, of course, continue now for some time, but we'll say goodnight from the House of Representatives at Parliament House in Canberra.